And I think you can get people to agree with you that you should have a right to do what you will with your own body and your own presentation. I think that it'll be much harder to get people to agree that you are a woman.
I guess one thing that I am curious about is that you said like negotiating for your rights, right? And when I think of like negotiation, I think, you know, both parties are making concessions, right? And like, I don't understand how you could negotiate rights because you either have them or you don't. And I'm not saying like, oh, it's a right for everybody to call me she, her, right? Like, I actually agree with you a lot in that I can't control everybody. And I also have grown up like in a conservative environment. And I do resonate with, I don't care if you think I'm a male or a female. Ultimately, like, I want to do this thing and like look this way, I'm going to, is a better argument than like, oh no, you need to call me she, her. But anyways, I guess my point is, when you say like negotiating for your rights, like what do you mean? Or like when we look at like modern examples of, you know, certain states attempting to strip back the ability to get medication for adult trans individuals, you know, I don't even want to open the child trans individuals can of worms, but like adult individuals, which like I feel like most people might agree on, that like adults should be able to self-express and like have autonomy and control over their own bodies. Anyways, long-winded way of asking you, like, what do you mean by negotiating?
What I mean is that if we're being realistic, the only rights that you practically have are the ones that you can defend. Like, maybe philosophically, you believe in some sort of God-given, inalienable rights that are inherent to your being in some natural way. Personally, I am not of the opinion that there's some kind of, you know, true fact of the universe about what rights are, or even, you know, frankly, what like morals are. I don't know if that's a true fact about the universe. But what I do know is that the powers that be are going to defend your ability to engage in certain actions in exact proportion to your ability to negotiate that defense. And so when we think pragmatically, you know, you can believe that you have a right to whatever, but I think what really matters is what you can get people to agree with you on. And I think you can get people to agree with you that you should have a right to do what you will with your own body and your own presentation. I think that it'll be much harder to get people to agree that you are a woman or that you should have the ability to participate in like women's sports teams. And so I think that you should like focus on these things. And to an extent, I think that like, unfortunately, when you focus on the harder things to argue for, I think you hurt your case overall. Like when you are dogmatically insistent that you control people's language and you control what they think of you, whether they think you're a woman or not, I think a lot of people are just going to outright reject all of your desires. They're not going to come to the table after you say that. So I think that you have to be pretty realistic with what you can get people to agree with you on. And unfortunately, I think that's a perspective that is born out of like having to interact with these people, like interacting with turfy and gender critical and conservative people in a way that if you grow up in a really liberal area or you live in a big liberal city, like, yeah, it's much easier in that environment to argue that like trans women are women and make that your battleground. But in the areas where states are trying to like roll back protections or roll back rights to adult transition, that can't be the battleground. So yeah, my perspective is ultimately, I think, kind of pragmatic on these things.
I can see where you're coming from with that. And I also do agree that like the urban versus rural like way of looking at things is like very different. And there's a lot of bias both directions, both from like urban people looking at rural people and rural people looking at urban people. So I do resonate with like the arguments do need to be different in some ways.
I think so.